Welcome to the Outer Circle Inner Stillness, conversations and reflections on spirituality, sobriety, and where they intersect. I'm glad you are all here. I am talking today with special guest Matt Droguett from Hawaii. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm glad to meet you. For the listener who doesn't know who you are, who are you? What's your corner of the world? What's your corner of the recovery counseling world and things like that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I feel like I'm still trying to figure out who I am. It's an ever evolving journey. But yeah, I mean, I'm a life consultant and a self-sabotage coach or expert, and I've been in this space for a number of years. And I thought a lot over the past few years, like whether to become like a certified counselor, therapist, trauma-informed EMDR specialist, things like that. I just realized, that in my time over doing this over the past 10 years, that most therapists and counselors, it's not mandatory for them to get their own therapy and counseling and training. And, in your master's for counseling, you just learn it all. You basically learn the legalities in your master's, and you don't actually learn how to counsel. And I learned that the hard way by entrusting my time and my money with a lot of people who said they could counsel me but couldn't. So I just spend my time in this space, hopefully delivering a lot of value and results to the people that I work with, which primarily up to this point over the past few years has just been, working with men, helping them out of self-sabotage in relationships and their marriages, and then helping them out of pornography addictions more specifically.
Great. What what brought you to this work in particular? Just from your own story, or what interests you in particular in working with men with pornography addiction?
Yeah, good question. It was all because of my own failures and faults and findings, where I broke up with my wife 3 times when we were dating because I was emotionally unavailable. I spiritually bypassed all my pain, which for those who, need like a 20-second breakdown, it's basically when you use your spiritual or religious practice and affiliation to avoid all of your pain or your trauma and your mess and your baggage. And I was a professional at that. And so I would quote and scripture my way through everything, just pray or fast or declare my way through every problem, and just invalidated myself and the people that wanted to be close with me. And so after almost losing my marriage while my wife and I were dating, I was forced, to go on a journey. And by forced, I mean, I felt like I had no other option. I was either going to lose the most important relationship to me because I refused to grow, or I could grow. And so I chose to grow. And, my wife and I, we've been married for 5 years now. We got 3 kids. So it's been a transformative journey. But the only reason why I stepped into helping guys be free from porn is because as I started coaching guys just into emotional health, because I have a dream and a goal to see emotionally healthy people go viral. And I noticed that, guys started ghosting me every 2-3 weeks, working together, and I didn't understand why. And I was like, dude, we're here to help you step into your destiny, help you step into your clarity, your power, your confidence, your marriage, all these certain things. And then, they said that they slipped up back into porn, and that really frustrated me because I was like, we're making great progress. You self-sabotaged or self-protected, really. That'd be the more endearing, compassionate term for it. And they went back to porn. And that made me really, really angry. So not out of a desire to, I mean, a lot of people associate me to being in like the PMO space, which stands for like porn, masturbation, orgasm kind of recovery. And to be quite candid, and I'll say this to everybody, and I share it in all my podcasts and all of my own work, is that I'm not passionate about helping guys quit porn. I'm passionate about helping guys live whole, healthy, and free lives. And if that's the biggest blockade for them to do that, which is most men, broad stroke, then I want to go to war on that thing. It's the Goliath of the day and age that, prevents a lot of men from understanding who they are and walking in that, as I'm sure you fully understand already, Reese. So that would be kind of my shorter version of how I got entered into this space.
Okay. There's a whole lot there. I'm actually really interested in more about the spiritual bypass idea. I'm familiar with the term, and it's definitely a challenge. But I wonder if you could actually say a little bit more about that, like what you see is the difference between like what would like be a healthy spiritual practice of spiritual disciplines versus more, I guess, like the acting in manager part. I'm using like religious language to like cover up stuff. How would one recognize the difference, do you think?
Sure. You know, it's interesting when you look at the fruit, when you look at the external, you can do the same thing two different ways. You know, you could wake up, pray, read your Bible, and meditate as a form of running towards connection. And then you can wake up, you can pray, you can meditate, you can read your Bible, you can put on worship music, you can even go to church as a way to avoid yourself. And what I realized for myself, and this is broad stroke most people, is that there's a profound safety when you realize that you're on the right side of eternity. It doesn't matter what your religious affiliation is, like whether you're Islam, whether you're Hindu, you know, whether you're Christian, which would be, you know, my professing act of faith, is that there is a huge, huge, huge core need met for safety when you drop into that type of faith of saying, you know, I'm going to heaven, everyone else is going to hell, that kind of adage. And so the reason why there's such an affinity or proclivity towards unhealthy and toxic people clinging to religion is because of the trauma and abandonment that they had from when they were younger. They feel like they can wipe it all away by being part of this religious sect or act or group. And by the way, my faith is very near and dear to me. And I think that there was such a genuine aspect of me that would walk these things out, but I was just immature. I was uneducated. I didn't know any better. And so, you know, I don't think that people are doing this deliberately, but there's a huge sense of control that we find when we do these elements, you know, be a good boy. And so it's another way of trying to get the core needs met for connection, love, and significance. But instead of it being from mom, dad, and family, it's now God. And so you want to do those things because you want to please your creator. The problem is that we think our creator still wants us to just be a good little boy, you know, to not mess up, to just do good, to just be good, to just be nice, to just play fair, to just please and get it right, dang it. And then we end up crumbling under the weight of that. And so I realized that, you know, I've been porn free for like 11 years, but I wouldn't say I truly quit until about 6 years ago, because the first 5, I didn't get to the root of the problems that were driving me to cope. So I just found other addictions. You know, I went to porn to get significance and connection. When I became a Christian as a late teenager, I ended up going into ministry. So a lot of performance. So the same way you would work at it in a career, a lot of Christians do in the church or in ministry, but it's more socially acceptable and it's more glamorized because, you know, there's this altruistic, you know, like I'm reaching the pinnacle of faith and servant, you know, hood to other people. So we try to emulate the life of like a Mother Teresa or a Gandhi, and we try to replicate the fruit, but we don't realize that the heart posture is radically different. And so we're trying to do the same acts, the same feats, but again, the energy is different. For Mother Teresa, it came from overflow, from identity, from peace, from a sense of deep knowing and safety that like God was with her in every act. And then other people are trying to do it so that they know that they're safe with God, so that they know that God loves them, so that they know that they're chosen, loved, and significant. And that's when I say is when we spiritually bypass, is to generally invalidate ourselves because we have a no-fly zone of like, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to go to the deepest, darkest places of my life. So I'm just going to find the best way I know how. And it's actually like, it's a very creative thing to do, you know? So I don't have shame. I don't have judgment towards myself because that's my past and my history, or towards anyone else who does it. Just got to realize that coping is coping, no matter how you want to slice it. And I don't think that God or your creator, whatever your affinity is towards, if you believe in something, is towards us, you know, continuing to put band-aids over bullet holes. He loves the deeper work. And that's why I'd say, for myself, I was a professional at spiritually bypassing my pain. So for example, I'll give you just a quick example. An example of spiritually bypassing would be, let's just say I had a really hard day. You know, my wife and I felt disconnected. I felt like just a failure as a dad. I'm just making things up right now. And I just felt like, you know, I wasn't good enough. And I did my best, but I just feel like I'm not good enough. I'm unwanted, I'm unloved, and I'm feeling really dejected. Maybe I don't feel like I'm providing enough or performing well enough. And, you know, when someone asks me how I'm doing, I can say and share a couple of those real transparent thoughts. And I'm like, you know what, but God is good. And, you know, he's going to lead me through this. And, you know, like he's covering me, and, you know, his mercies are new. And I know that he's got a plan for me in my life. Now, the biggest thing that I do with people when I work with them is I pause them. I say, okay, stop. Everything you just said was genius up until that point, because you got so uncomfortable with your own transparency and vulnerability, your own nakedness emotionally, that you felt the need to cover it up. You felt the need to create and have answers. And all that's doing is reinforcing how stuck you feel and invalidating what you just shared. What would it be like if you were actually just share everything you felt, how like inadequate you are experiencing yourself in this moment, and understood that you didn't need to say God is good for him to still be good, and you still feel that way. Like, you don't need to say God's got this unless you're trying to stop yourself from really feeling something. God knows he's got this. God knows he's going to get you through. You're the one who doesn't know that. So you're quoting your way through something that's scripted that you learned because you learned from a certain age that it's not okay to just be raw. You have to package the form. It's not okay for you to just show your authentic self and be left without answers. So you're trying so hard to grasp and create them to cover up the wounding. But when you do that, you actually block your ability for people to love you in your pain, because you just created a barrier. It's like you opened up the cage and you showed the wounded animal inside, and you're like, see how much he's hurting? And then you slam the door shut and you got the keys, and you're like, but it's all going to be okay for him to starve a little while longer, because, you know, everything's going to be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're speaking to some parts. So I resonate with that. Also, growing up in the church and growing up in a lot of, growing up in a Protestant church, and I mean, obviously, I didn't have language for this at the time, but I very much resonate with that. As for my grown up experience, it was very much like, be super spiritual, sing all the songs, do all the ministries, go to the camps, and I feel like the goal was always. My particular churches, they seemed like they had a bigger emphasis on this kind of radical Christianity that ended up being like more feelings-based, more sensational than anything. And so I think one of the challenges I ran into was there wasn't any consistency, and there wasn't really a really well-developed like spiritual practice. I think what I'm appreciating, I really appreciated when you talked about like inviting people into that pause. And I would imagine there's an aspect of quietness, of stillness to that. With my spiritual practice now, it's informed by Eastern Orthodoxy, and we really talk a lot about the inner stillness and the prayer of the heart. And it's not intellectual, it's not emotional. There's like an embodied component often, because I mean we'll take a posture for it, but it is very much like I'm stepping into the stillness where I have to face myself, or I have to really just like be with God. And that stepping away from all my attempts to like cover over stuff or intellectualize things, or kind of like coach myself that God is good. I mean, which is funny, because there's a way where the way you talk to yourself is important, and that matters. And to a certain degree, we should be speaking truth to ourselves. But I get what you're saying. There's also a way where I could be like, I'll just kind of glibly throw up a cliche or throw up a Bible verse I don't really understand, rather than actually feeling pain or actually mourning something or actually repenting of something. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, 100%. And, that's where I feel like there's such a black and white version of this journey. You get people that are like, like life coaches or mindset coaches, and then they focus all on like the way you speak. And I believe that your words create worlds massively. Like one of the few reasons why we really get stuck is due to our language. That's absolutely true. But you get people focusing on that, where it becomes more like behavioral based, Carl Jung, Pavlov, like all those kind of ideas, where it's just about the modality of focusing on, the words you speak and your declarations. But when you have complex PTSD, you have trauma, you can't declare your way out of it. You got to go internal. So when you're talking about like, inner stillness, and you're talking about getting quiet, what you're really talking about is opening up the mind through reflection. What I love so much about what a true rabbi was meant to do, like in the times of Jesus, and that's where I try to base a lot of my practice off of, is that a rabbi was primarily known as someone who caused you to rethink your reality. That's why you read through the Bible or any, like Seneca or any kind of Greek philosopher or text. They would say things or they would ask questions so profoundly to cause you to open up your mind. And so that's why, that's what a function of a rabbi was to primarily be led by asking questions that would open up your mind. And through therapy and counseling, that's what I appreciate about the approach in a lot of regards, is it does do that. It gets you internal. And in my sense, a healthy way of it, a healthy introspection where, what needs to come up will come up, And so if buried feelings never die. And if you just try to declare your way out of it, it's like you still got dead bodies under the floor, dude. You'll never avoid that fact, which is why people go to great lengths to escape themselves and realize that, all these years later, they are still with themselves and their problems too.
Right. Yeah. I use internal family systems modality, and we use a lot of language that talks about that. We talk about our exile parts, or the parts of ourselves, the experiences that we have that for whatever reason, we just don't allow into the forefront of our consciousness. And what we discover is those end up being the parts that run the system, because like you said, like the pain doesn't go away just because we want it to, or just because we say nice words. That pain needs to be felt and witnessed, and in some cases mourned, in some cases healed, before we can actually heal. So I was interested in getting some of your thoughts around the way I'd phrased it in my head originally was, common mistakes in early recovery. Although I really appreciate hearing more about how you work in looking at something like recovery from pornography addiction as a thing that's in a bigger context. I think I see that the thing you see too, where we'll maybe get fixated on, here's this behavior that I don't like, that I want to quit. But it seems like you'll take that and put it in the bigger context of like, well, how do I live as a healthy person, as an emotionally healthy person? I love that idea. So I guess, so with that idea, so you say somebody's wanting to go on that journey to become a more healthy person, become more emotionally healthy. Sure, some sort of addictive behaviors, a major barrier. What do you see as some like common mistakes that people make in like those early months of that journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. Candidly, the audio did cut out for like 15, 20 seconds there, but I caught the tail end of the question, which is common mistakes people make. But I felt like I really wanted to hear all the profound things you're mentioning. Yeah. Let me know if this sounds par for the course.
Okay.
The biggest thing, there's two things. I mean, there's certain character traits that you need to quit porn. So people overlook that massively. Like when a guy approaches me and he's asking me to help him quit porn, immediately my mind goes, what's this dude's character? So I'll give you two. The first one's going to be honesty. And we overlooked that. We're like, okay, just get real. Like, say, yep, I struggle with porn. Great, I was honest. No. This is not a linear equation. This isn't a yes or a no. Like, are you honest? It's to what degree are you honest? To what degree are you being authentic and genuine and real? And most people, again, they cover up. We all do. We all want to. The same way we spiritually bypass is the same way we invalidate how stuck we are in our recovery. It's so common for me to hear guys being like, well, it's struggling here, but I'm doing pretty good. Like, it's been 3 days now, or it's been a week, so I feel like I'm on the up and up. I'm like, dude, like, you have to be willing for your life to really, really suck, which most people won't do. They won't allow their life to really suck, which is why I say the honesty piece is because we lack the integration. Integrity means to be whole and to be integrated. And most people live a fragmented life where they are lying to themselves perpetually because they're trying to cover something up. It would be the end of their world if they realized that they were not everything they've been trying to string and hold together. I understand that, but you have to be willing for the house of cards to fall. You have to be willing for everything to crumble and to just get so brutally honest. Like, people say you only really change when you kind of hit rock bottom. There's 3 ways that people change. The first one is when things get so bad that you absolutely have to. The second one is when you get inspired enough that you want to. The third one is when you learn enough that you know to. But generally speaking, broad stroke, the only thing that really grips our attention is when life gets really, really bad. So it's not uncommon. Guys will come to me after their wife has left them. You know, she's taken the kids, taken all the money out of the bank account. That situation just happened last week, you know, with a guy who reached out to me. And instead of, you know, I'd say, because I've always heard it said that the prevention of disease is much easier than the cure of it. And I said, it's too late, dude. Average cost of divorce is $100,000. You're out of here. You got nothing. And he's like, well, that's not going to happen to me because I don't have that kind of money. I'm like, well, it's going to happen to you. And you're going to have to come up with that kind of money because you're going to get court mandated therapy and counseling, which is going to be super subpar, you know, and you're not going to get the help you're needing. Lo and behold, he texted me back. He's like, I can't work with you. I have to put my money towards getting court. And I was like, yep, I know the whole string. Like, you're stuck, dude. This is sucky for you. And I understand. But it's because we thought that we were leading people on well enough into our own lie. We get high on our own supply. We're drinking that Kool-Aid. And so that's why I could spend a whole podcast with you if we wanted to break down just every character trait, like the 5 needed to quit porn. And one of them, we could talk for 2 hours on just honesty. Like, you don't realize, we feel like it's innate the same way we feel like, you know, learning love in a relationship is innate, but it's really, really, really freaking hard, dude. Especially when you grow up in a background where people are lying all the time and you don't even realize it. And it's so deeply embedded into your subconscious. That honesty piece is everything. But again, it's not, are you honest? It's to what degree are you being honest? So that would be the first thing. The second one would tether into that with humility. And I don't need to spend much time on that, but the other piece in there is then people just think they can do it on their own, which I'm fine with up until the point that it's really keeping them stuck. You know, I'm all about self-empowerment. I'm all about people going on the journey, but we don't know what we don't know. Like, if my head gasket blows, I don't care if you give me all the tools to fix it. I won't know. And I'll probably feel inept while on YouTube trying to figure it out. I'm like, just take me to someone who knows how to deal with this and move me along. Like, I don't need to waste my time. But so many guys will step in thinking like, I should be able to quit this due to shame. So their shame is actually fueling them into trying to do this all by themselves and using modalities of isolation because of how much shame they're in. And they feel like it's an attack on their masculinity, that they're not strong, that they're not capable if they ask for help, which is just completely incorrect to, you know, all of human history,
right?
And getting further ahead. But
yeah, I feel like there's and maybe you would have gotten to this too, but like there's a characteristic embedded in that because with something like humility, I mean, yes and amen. I mean, humility is the only virtue that the devil cannot imitate. But somewhere there's this balance of, sometimes I need to take responsibility from my own self and do my own work. And a lot of times I need to ask for help. And somewhere in there needs to be this very like non-rigid, fluid, flexible perception of like, well, what's the situation I'm in? Is it, you know, like, yes, my head gasket blows. I don't even know what that is. So yes, I should ask for help. But sometimes if it's like, hey, you need to like get a budget. I mean, I should write my own budget. Like there's some things I can and should do by myself, but I guess like the skill to figure out in there is how to tell the difference, which I guess, I mean, you could learn that through, again, getting into the quiet and like being able to check in with your gut sense, or like having a good mentor to let you know those things. But yeah.
Yeah, but you hit the nail on the head there with taking ownership and responsibility. Like, especially, I don't know if all your listeners here, Reese, are spiritual or religious, but I let me say it this way. I would have an easier time helping secular, non-religious men quit porn than men in the church, because so many men deviate all the responsibility and ownership of them quitting porn onto God, and they misunderstand the roles at play here. And until I find someone, or any man is willing and able to take full 100% responsibility and accountability for his own thoughts, feelings, actions, emotions, and decisions, past, present, and the direction of his future, he will be stuck forever. You have to, like, every bit of change is predicated upon extreme ownership. You know, I always like to say that ownership means to own your ship. Leadership means to lead your ship. And if you're not leading it, someone else is. And to your point, when you said about humility is the only virtue that the devil can't imitate, I'd say unless he gets creative and crafty and creates it into false humility, then a lot of people operate out of that. because most people don't know the difference, because they'll say they're humble, but really it's low self-worth, and you can tell, you can feel that.
You're really good.
But I love that idea. Humility is super essential.
Yeah, definitely. There's a specific question that comes up a lot in my groups around honesty, and I love that we're camping on that. We actually did like a whole like 10-week series on integrity repair, and we're exploring like, here's all of the different ways you actually are lying, and like there's like 10 different kinds of deception, and
Love
spent
that.
a long time exploring, well, what does integrity mean? And and it was really good, and we tied it back to trauma and everything. But the particular question that often comes up, and this is for people in relationships, and often it's once they've gotten started on a recovery process, they might have even already done like a full disclosure sort of process too, but there's this ongoing question of like, well, what should I tell my partner? Like, how big of a slip how big of a slip does she need to know if it's a she, and what can I hide? And like, I looked at somebody with lustful thoughts. Do I need to say that? I've been having cravings. Do I need to say that? And we observe that there seems to be a balance somewhere in there of like overshare versus now I'm hiding again. Curious if you have any thoughts about that.
I have so many thoughts about it. It's one of my favorite questions and or situations. A lot of it, I'll give some broad stroke, I don't know, guidelines, rules, practices, because I think that's helpful in the midst of the nuance. But it is helpful to understand how you and your partner relate. For example, the average partner relationship, a marriage in the US, sees each other about 2 hours a day. My wife and I see each other probably 10 to 12 hours a day. I'm working a lot, but I work from home, so I'm there with the kids. So the ability for our relationship to compound is far greater, which means we communicate a lot about all the little things we're always at the forefront of. It's like every 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour, there's a check-in, and we're aware of what's happening with the other person. So my point is other people don't have that proclivity. They might be working, they might be traveling. So you do need to understand your own relationship. Like, that's just going to take self-awareness. So let's just say, for example, like broad stroke, you're in a relationship and you're struggling with porn and your partner doesn't know. You've been hiding it from them. Again, we can role play this a few different ways, which is why I love this, because it gets so gritty and it gets so granular. But your partner doesn't know and you want to quit. The biggest thing that your partner needs 10 times out of 10 is safety. A woman needs safety. She needs security. Now, if this was, gambling, or this was something else other than it's affecting her, because if you're lusting after other women, you're watching porn, like, it's going to affect her. I always get guys saying like, oh, I got the most supportive wife on the planet. She's my accountability partner. I'm like, dude, she's dying inside. She resents you for it. And she might look on the outside of the cup super happy and supportive and loving, which I don't doubt she is in her authentic self, but you are creating so much pain for her in the midst of you self-sabotaging this way. So I just don't want you to be blind to thinking that your wife is cool with this, because some guys might mistake it for that. So in the context of this conversation, I'll just say whatever you can possibly do to bridge safety and having your wife feel like you are taking full responsibility over the situation. So oftentimes that'll look like, getting into a recovery program, a coach, like something so you come to the table. Like, you have two scenarios. You can either go to your wife and you say, hey babe, I'm struggling with a porn addiction. I'm thinking about getting help. I haven't done anything. I'm as lost as I am ever. Like, what do we do? Or you could say, hey babe, I wanted to let you know that I'm getting help right now for something I've been hiding for a long time, and I'm really, really sorry. I should have taken care of this years ago, but I was scared and I was afraid, but you deserve better. I deserve better. We deserve better. So I've made the choice and decision to get help with this, to overcome this addiction to porn that I've been having, because I didn't want you to feel at the mercy of needing to come together with a decision for me, which I'll see so often in married couples. I get that there's a togetherness. There's actually a trauma bond that we have with our spouse and our significant other. When it's been years that they've known about our addiction, we actually end up creating connection from a place of trauma and pain and sabotage, and we don't know how to create it truly. So they're kind of like in the thick of it with us. which is why we don't know how to make decisions on our own. But I'll always say to a guy, I'm like, they'll be like, well, I need to talk to my wife and see if this is a good fit for us. And I'm like, sorry, man, you lost the right to ask your wife. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. You lost the right to ask your wife about this the moment that you didn't ask her if you should go to Pornhub. If you ask your wife every single time you want to go to Pornhub, can I go there? And she said yes, then I'd say she has the right to be on the decision-making process with you for the solution, but she never created the problem. You did. So you need to do whatever is possible within your power, which is everything, to solve this on your own, which is why I'm a huge fan, again, of personal ownership and responsibility on this, because I'm like, it's not a woman's problem. She's at the mercy of you and your decision-making skills and abilities and value. And so if you're like, oh, well, it's going to cost me money to get counseling. I'm like, good, it should, because clearly it isn't costing you enough to go to porn on your own. And again, this is me with a ton of compassion, a ton of love, and there's no judgment. Like, I'm not judging a guy, and I'm not angry, and I'm not upset, but I do need to sometimes speak clearly with guys depending. But other times I can see, I remember a client of mine, he was a pastor of a church. He'd been struggling with this for like 20 years. And I could tell, I'm like, this guy is a real character, teachable, humble heart. And his wife is known. I had the conversation with both of them, and we talked through the whole thing, what it was going to be, how it was going to work. And I was like, I could just tell it was right. Like, they were a really healthy couple, just super, super stuck periodically with the husband going to porn. And I knew that there was remorse. I knew that there was true repentance. And so that's why I'm saying there's subtle nuance depending on the relationship. But if you're already radically disconnected and your wife you've been hiding a porn addiction with her for 12 years, today's not your day to just tell her, hey, babe, I'm struggling with porn and I'm thinking of getting help. What do you think? Like, there's no room, there's no grace for conversation in that. Mm-hmm. But if she's been with you all the way, then I'd say there is. But in terms, I'll just touch on this piece real quick. But in terms of thoughts, I'm getting urges, temptation. I have a desire. I believe that not every thought is your own. I really don't believe that every thought is yours. They're on the outside of the door knocking to come in. And you need to learn the difference between what is you innately and what's the environment around you, because all of this is representative of something else. I even listened, checking out your Instagram stuff because I love it here, Reese, and you're even just sharing. It's like, it's not about porn, it's about our connection to it and what it represents, which is why I don't feel the necessity for a man to have to tell his wife about every single time he looked at a girl, like, oh, I saw a girl's boobs while walking down the street and I really wanted it. I'm like, no. Understand what it might represent to you. Comfort, safety, security, something to conquer, something to accomplish, significance, connection, love, like whatever those might be. And take that as an opportunity for you to get reflective and go inward, and actually uncover for yourself. Because otherwise we're talking about the fruit, not the root. We're talking about the wrong thing, like the check engine light on the car. It's it's indicative of problems in the hood. So I'm like, I don't think that we need to make mountains out of molehills, although it's important. You just need to learn to take every thought captive and to figure out what that uniquely represents to you.
And that would come back again to having that practice of checking in. So insert like any sort of reflective mindfulness, self-awareness practice is going to be working in this direction to be gaining that awareness you're talking about, of recognizing, okay, when is this a thought that's coming to me? When is this, spiritual warfare? When is this just, this is like, social media throwing stuff at me, versus when is it, okay, now it's my system. I'm lonely. I'm feeling insecure. I'm feeling invisible, and I'm needing something, not actually needing like the lustful image on the screen, but like that's the thing I've trained myself to grab onto. But to tell the difference, to discern the difference, means being with yourself and being aware of yourself. So I really like that idea. I'm appreciating that.
I can say something if that's cool.
Yeah.
My safety rule for my life and all the guys I work with is I try to simplify everything. Again, I didn't go to college. I don't have a degree. I have a little bit of experience under my belt that I try to share to help people with. But I've found it to get complicated when I try to decipher and discern what is spiritual warfare, what's emotional, what's environment, what's me. And I try to simplify it and just say it's all me. It's all on me. Because right now, let's just say, what the algorithm on social media puts towards me is so far from like, half-dressed women. But let's just say it was, and I saw that and I got aroused or had a desire. I have to be responsible to say, okay, what's the unmet needs within me that's wanting to run towards that? I've also heard Peter Cesaro say that you cannot become truly spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. And so I've just not found it helpful for guys to blame the devil and say it's spiritual warfare. I'm like, well, all spiritual warfare is emotional warfare. So if you learn to master the mind and to master your emotions and your emotional state, the devil has the least amount of grip and hold over you, because the opposite of addiction, is self-awareness. It's connection. The basis of addiction is ignorance. So you can totally break every single bit of addiction in your life by gaining knowledge and wisdom, which is why I just simplify it. And I just say, hey, dude, like, all of this is on you, whether it's your phone, whether it's internally led. There's an unmet need. There's a bit of a deficit going on. And when we feel worthless, we're going to want to partner with, choices that are worth less.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always say.
Yeah.
Is that when we feel worthless, we want to partner with choices, actions, and decisions that are worth less than our created value. So the goal within that is you just got to go internal. You don't got to figure out like where it's all coming from. And like, was it because of social media? You just say, okay, I'm feeling this way, and being like, what's the core of it? What's really going on? Like, Matt, slow yourself down, breathe, focus on your breath, just be like, what are you really needing right now? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling disconnected? Where did this begin? What's really going on, dude? And then that's when you get a cut between the wheat and the chaff and get extreme clarity. But it does require you to slow down. I've never seen someone who's overcome an addiction by living a fast-paced, sped-up life. That's why I said Jesus and rabbis always cause you to slow your thinking, challenge your belief systems, and get you to question, because a question will open the mind.
Right. And it was Jesus who, while on the boat in the stormy sea, took a nap while everyone else was freaking out. And that was, we should be more like him. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Speaking of ships, I've been thinking about the way you talked about ownership is like owning your ship, and that idea, like that approach to honesty, responsibility, and things. And I keep spinning over this image of, take the captain of a ship who, is like in a storm and sinking or something. And just thinking a couple of different models, like you're talking about, here's this guy who's like, oh, what do you think, honey? Should I like do something about this? It kind of calls to mind this image of a captain who's like, oh my ship's sinking. I'm going to go like hide away and like hope everybody is okay, and just like abdicates. And it's kind of lame in that way, versus like a captain who like does anything really, like to try to say like, okay, I have a plan. Maybe it's not a good plan, but I'm going to put in action. I'm going to strike out, take action, like try to put people in the right places. I'm going to try to do something, and maybe it's not quite the right thing, but like at least he's present and he's available, and he's moving, and the misguided but very active present like captain is probably going to be someone easier to work with, and might actually be able to fix something, much more than the person who's just like, I'm checking out, and I'm going to hope that my crew can do it on their own. I don't know. I really like that image that you gave there.
Yeah, it's true. The captain who takes full responsibility over everything, people can get behind. There's also, again, it drives home clarity. Like, that's why I personally believe that everything that happens is because of me. It's not happening to me, it's happening because of me. And knowingly or unknowingly, like, I wanted it, I created it, or I invited it into my life, even for the things that aren't like, quote, my fault, but it is my responsibility. And to someone who struggles with over responsibility, already in their life, where they felt like they were an extension of other people and they always had to do everything for everyone else, this can be hard. But because you feel the burden of like everyone else's stuff and then your own, because usually people who carry over responsibility abandon themselves to serve others. But there's a lot of healing that actually takes place when you disconnect and you cut off from who you're not, and you just manage your own. A lot of people can't manage their own ship because they're trying to manage other people's. And it's like, well, and then if everyone's trying to manage someone else's boat, it's a very powerless way to live, because you're always hoping that if you take care, the core unspoken rule of someone who's a people pleaser, and has a hard time taking personal responsibility is that they believe, and this is coming from my own personal experience, so this is kind of quoted from my own reflection of how I live my life, is that my belief is that if I took care of everybody else and their boat and their ship, maybe someone, once I finally took care of all their messes, would take care of mine. It's a tit for tat rule. And to a little kid, it makes sense. If I just please mom, if I just don't anger dad, if I just remain quiet and passive, if I just do and get the good grades and go to school the way they want me to, if I just stay out of the crossfires and I remain as a back burner child, then maybe, just maybe, I'll get the love I'm looking for. And so the core of it is control, is if I can control these people, if I can control how mom feels, how mom thinks, how dad reacts or doesn't, and we become master manipulators from a really young age. Again, this is childhood taught stuff, which is why the Bible's clear that if you train a child in the way he should go, he will remain faithful to it. In his later years, he won't depart from it because you've set the stage. You've created the container in which for him to play on center stage of life. It's a performance. And so when we're talking about responsibility and owning your ship and being the captain of it, there's a very real thread that needs to be tapped into of most people don't even know how, because they've been spending their whole life abandoning themselves to try to serve others. To try, if I do this for them, I'll be lovable, I'll be okay. And then at the end of the day, we come back to our burning sunken ship and we're like, crap, this didn't go the way I wanted.
Yeah. And it's important to recognize that people pleasing is not love. Like it's like you were saying, there's a core of control there. It's safety seeking, love seeking, but by trying to control others, it's a lot different than being present with someone. In our metaphor would be like, okay, I've taken care of my ship, I have a strong ship, it's well stocked, it's nice and clean, I have room for some guests, or I have room for some refugees, or I have some extra supplies that I can lend. And then it gets to be like a real love based on presence, and based on like, I don't need you to be okay for me to be okay. I delight in you and I want to be with you. And that's much more the love. But again, that has to be trained, that has to be cultivated. It helps if that happened for us in childhood, but a lot of us are starting over as adults. So that's just
the bridge between what I said and what you just mentioned was probably like 5 years of therapy work for me, and still ongoing, where like little Matt surfaces and just wants to please the people around him to be okay. It's codependency, like at its core. But I like talking about the root cause, like getting under the engine, from the check engine light that we just see proverbially, like the people pleaser. Because I feel like sometimes we can attack the behavior, like people pleaser. Oh, you're not doing this from presence. You're not doing it from connection. And what I found is that I made it harder on myself. I'd put myself down. I'd beat myself up for not still getting it right. I'm like, oh, and you're still codependent. You're still this. And I didn't realize that, dude, there's just a really wounded little kid in there who suffered a lot of trauma and pain. And it's taken me a long time, just because of my journey. I'm not saying it has to take you a long time, but it should take you a long time. Like all good things are worth, taking time for and waiting on. Not to say that it means you just wait there idly. Like there's a lot that I've been doing, but it'll come up, it'll flare, just like a part, like even talking about like, IFS, internal family systems. And there's like an exiled part within you that needs attention again. Like, oh man, I didn't know that you were living like in Egypt. And it makes sense why you're not making much of the promised land, because you're still operating like an orphan. And so I always, in my life, try to connect it back to a very compassionate place, because I do believe if we could have more compassion on ourselves and learn that skill, that we would release ourselves from the trauma and the burden that we've been holding ourselves hostage to.
Yeah, I agree very much so. Hey, I appreciate your time and your thoughts and sharing a lot of your story. And I'd hope people could connect with you. For the listener, where can you be found in the world and on the internet? And what are some of your projects right now?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Matt Droguett. Maybe you can throw it in the show notes or however you see fit. And then I got a podcast as well, the Matt Droguett Show. So if you can spell my last name right, then you could probably find me on every platform. I got a YouTube channel as well that I just recently started, so getting more out with that. But the main space right now, I'm actually working on an app. It's called Uplift. And my goal with this app is I think some guys might be listening to this, whether they've been following you or they're listening from my audience, and they'll be like, oh, dang, there's some really helpful stuff in here that I got reminded of today. But the key word is reminded. Most men don't need to be taught. They need to be reminded of what they already know, which is the difference between a guy saying, I was doing good for a week, I was doing good for a month, and then I slipped up, is they forgot the fundamental truths that got them that 6 days clean of them being enough, them being worthy. And then again, that part flared up, that exiled part. And so I created this app called Uplift to be able to send out, and they can set the frequency of it, but truth bombs and statements on identity, on recovery, on relapse, on connection, on all of these elements on how to overcome porn and lust and master this by sending them these quotes or these messages every single day, between like 1 to 10 times a day. Just come as a notification to your phone. You don't have to click on it. You don't have to do anything, but just to be a constant barometer of truth being spoken over you, so that as life is happening, it can take time to either listen to this podcast while you're driving, you're working out, you're doing other things. But how quickly do we just snap to our phone for a quick text, or someone gets our nervous system jacked up and off kilter? So this app I'm working on called Uplift, it should be ready in the next couple months here, like 2-3 months, is going to be my gift, so that people can be able to create mastery over their recovery by having these messages of identity and truth and healing spoken to them on a constant and chronic basis.
That sounds really exciting. I love the sound of that. It sounds like it'd be like not really overwhelming, like just like little bits that I could read quickly or not, because I know short attention spans. But yeah, to be able to like how just be constantly reminded of things. I mean, it's again going back to like what in our spiritual practice, a lot of like why we would go to church, why we would participate in the community. It's not, at one point, it's not really to learn more things. It's more to call to remembrance the things that we all already know, the realities that we're needing to participate in. So that sounds genius.
Yeah, I only made it because I felt like it was a big need as a gap with all the men I work with. Like we've served like dudes 18 to 73, all walks of life, from like normal everyday dudes like me to like, professional sports athletes, Hollywood actors. My point is across the board, maybe this is due to my need for control or want for control, or maybe it's just a blend because I really want to serve and help. Again, the line can get crossed, but the action's still the same. But what I realize is that I can help guys when I get them on calls, when they're in our programs, when they're in the coursework, when they're talking to a coach, but if a coach is like, dude, they haven't got a hold of me in like 3 days, or it's been 4 days since they've reached out to me, I'm like, I don't like that. I want to find a way that I can just get in their life and be a chronic coach, a constant voice of love and encouragement and empowerment, cheering them on. So I was like, how the flip can I possibly do that? And I thought about, just kind of sending broadcasted text messages to people, but I just felt like an app was more empowering, where they could have control over the topics for a recovery and in which they were wanting. And again, not recovery from porn, but recovery into sonship and into true placed identity and in their purpose. And so a lot of those things that you can choose that are topic based. So I just felt like it'd be a helpful way based on the needs that I saw presenting themselves to me.
Cool. That sounds great. Well, I'll look for updates about that, and that'll be a fun thing to explore with people. So for the listener, thanks for hanging out with us. Check out the Matt Droguett Show on YouTube and all the places, and you can follow him on Instagram. You can continue to follow me here, also on Instagram at New Pattern Counseling, and also on YouTube and on Patreon.com/Outer Circle and all the places. And the show is made possible by listeners, also by Furcrest Behavior Healthcare in Vancouver, Washington. And we will be back soon with more cool ideas for you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Reese.